Well, I'm keenly aware that the sun is down, the thirst is rising, and yet we've got an opportunity here to talk about one of the most important aspects of the day, and that is the money. And in my opening slide, I said, what is green? And I had a dollar bill up there, U.S. currency. But at the end of the day, whatever we do, whatever we try and innovate, at some point it's got to run into the realities of funding. And we've got two people here today to talk about very different aspects of it. The grant side, the funds that are out there from government to help incentivize things. And we also have a member who is putting his own money into the technology, showing the private capital side and interest in this. So again, last panel session of the day. I encourage you to ask questions. I'm going to start it off with asking Sebastian. Obviously, a grant application can seem to be a most formidable affair with a lot of steps in it. And any advice on how people should approach that and identify which grants make the most sense for their needs?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I would say, especially if you're a small organization, is to not be afraid to ask for guidance. Funding agencies will often speak to you directly. Like I said, my organization is not the only one out there, but having those conversations so that you can holistically understand what the goals of the funding program are a really, really important step to take early on, because it's a really big shame and also a waste of your time if you put an application together and then at the end it turns out that the goals aren't perfectly aligned with what that funding agency was asking for. So I think some of the first steps are kind of look at what groups are out there that can help you, what exactly it is you're looking to fund. Maybe you know that, maybe you don't. And that's completely fine too. There are a lot of people that are really new to the funding space. And there are a lot of agencies that are putting up, their first Marine grants too. And there's a learning curve there for the funding agencies. And when we see those programs come around a second time, they're often in better shape. New programs often have a public comment period where fleets can go and talk to the agency about, I saw you are proposing you're going to ask this. That would be a really big challenge for me administratively, or you have this requirement. I don't think I can meet that. So I think don't be afraid to talk to others about what's going on, whether that be the funding agency or someone who can help write your grants.
Thank you. Austin, the marine industry is a very competitive one. And as you're setting up your customer relationships, can you give us a little bit about how you work with those customers in order to get to a deal that works for both sides?
Yeah. So maybe a little color here. We've actually hired G&A to run, just full disclosure. We've hired them to go find money for our project. Vic and I are funding that out of our own pockets right now. They've done a great job, and Sebastian's right. It's daunting. I wouldn't know the first place to start. And they were very good at holding our hands to identify the projects or the programs that can open up some of that funds that's available to something like this. So if you're considering this, I would highly recommend talking to these guys. Soup to nuts, it's been very good. So thank you. On the customer side, it's very important, and again, I can't speak to the ferry side of the space, but in our business, in the inland business, it's built on trust and integrity and honesty. And so I strive to live that life every day with all of our team at the office, and obviously even more so to our stakeholders, our partners, and ultimately our customers. And if you're able to deliver when they need it most, you'll have a customer for life. And we've seen the last, call it 2 years, the worst downturn that our industry has ever seen. And over those 2 years, our average utility has been over 99.4%. So there was a lot of situations where customers could have returned assets at lease end, but they elected not to for a couple reasons, right? They on a triple net lease, they're responsible for all the maintenance and care of the vessel. So there's a lot of money they put in during the course of the term of the lease. And then when it comes up, if they were to give it back to me, even in a down market, they'd realize that we would go out and redeploy this thing, and they would soon be competing against a piece of equipment that they've just effectively, on a 3-year term paid for for 3 years. So it's not in their best interest to do that. But again, it comes down to the relationships and our ability to execute when not a lot of banks who are exiting the space can. And, I think it's also important, too, to give the guys some love in the office back home in New Orleans. They're spending, 12 plus hours a day, gemming out research and providing very quality intel to some of these operators that candidly aren't that sophisticated. So that's just another value proposition that we, try to help and provide our customers just to separate ourselves a little bit from the traditional banks.
Great. Any questions from the audience for our panelists? There in the back.
I have a question, and maybe it's one that Congressman Larson could have answered, or hopefully the panel can. In the industry, we get so excited when we see all of these grants come out, and then you start to read the fine print, and you're like, oh, are they talking about ferries in Alaska? I'm not a ferry in Alaska, I'm here in Washington, or I'm a private operator. And maybe you answered it already, but is the answer to try to hire a grant writing agency to go after these grants? Or when you're left with smaller buckets of money that are available for the general public, it doesn't go very far. And as an industry, we all want to move forward and we're excited, but we just need a little bit of funding to help get that momentum going. And so is there anything encouraging you can leave with us today about how much money is available for non-ferries in Alaska or commercial operators?
Yeah, so the short answer is higher G&A, but, secondly, on that, if and I'll let Sebastian finish it off, but just from our perspective, we didn't know what is available. You see these big numbers that Sebastian showed on the screen prior to me stepping up on stage, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases. Or how do you get your hands on it? Do you go to your local politician? Do you donate to their campaign? There's so many different avenues to that money, but I think hiring a professional like this can cut through all that time, red tape, save an enormous amount of time. It does cost a little bit of money, but just to put things into context, I think all in cost is about $100,000 for this service, and we're hoping to get between $5 and $7 million. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
So the fine print of grant writing will get everyone, especially with the infrastructure bill that happened last year and the Inflation Reduction Act that happened this year. The calls flooded in immediately after people started seeing those numbers of, well, how much money can I actually get? I'm a private company. I am a ferry operator in Alaska. I see there's a very large grant program completely targeted at me. So our process, at least, is first figure out exactly what you're looking for and exactly what you need. From there, we will find the funding program that matches those needs. We're not going to, we recognize that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution, and that's what grants are like too. So there might be a couple of different grants that you're eligible for. How do you choose the right one? Well, maybe it's the one that is going to return your funds the most quickly. These are all things that we really take into account. So encouraging words, I would say definitely read the fine print. And it is something that you can do if you have your own team. I just want to emphasize that you don't have to do it alone if you don't have your own team, because there are people that know the ins and outs of grant programs that have been around for years. And even if you want to write the grant yourself, we can still help you identify which might be the best for you to go after.
And the timing of these grants is really what I've learned during this process is super important. Because what I found is the money I spend from, call it T0 to that grant award date, that's on me. But anything after that grant award date, say the $5 million, I can use that to offset my costs after that date of award. So you really have to think through the timing. If you're going to build a new vessel, a new ferry, how that timing works relative to the funding you're hoping to get or apply for from any one of these grants.
Let me just quickly say that Sebastian makes a great point on the Casco Bay Ferry project. Our customer there actually brought together funds from, I think it was 4 or 5 different buckets of grant money in order to make the total CapEx that they needed to build the new vessel. So, you got to go out, you got to keep looking, but the funds are out there. There's one here and one on the far end of the room.
Just a quick question for projects that you're willing to commit to, because there's a match as far as what the ask is and what the program is. What is your success rate, or what should one expect as a success rate when going after these funds?
For our organization, or in terms of what's like the highest amount of money that you can get out of it?
Not the number, not the dollar amount, but just, you do the time, you pay for the service. Is that 100% match, or is it 50%, 10%? I'm just curious, how likely are you to receive money
Got it.
if you go through the process?
Sure. Just to clarify, just the grant process in general, or the grant process with us?
Yes and yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure. So because it's hard to speak to just the grant process itself. We have a 90% success rate. We've secured over $1 billion for our clients, and we've submitted over 550 grant applications. In terms of the grant process, we will not work on a grant that we don't think will win. We won't encourage anyone to submit a grant that we aren't very confident has a high likelihood of being awarded, because it doesn't turn out well for us, it doesn't turn out well for you if we've invested time and money into something that doesn't work out in the end. And that's also why we try to maintain a really strong relationship with the funding agencies themselves, so that we have a strong relationship to kind of base communication off with them to make sure that you have all of the knowledge that you need when you're starting to go into the grant writing process.
And from our standpoint, the total ask was 100,000, but it's only 10 grand to write the initial paper. They'll get their feedback. If they feel like they've got good traction and a road to execution, then you go forward on that second piece. So it's a very fluid process, and it's not just take my money and I hope I get something in return. So it's been very good with these guys.
And I'll say too, the project we're working on with Austin is a big one. $10,000 is not always the cost. It really.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. I just want to point out that it varies. If you want to apply for a program that requires a ton of data collection that you just kind of need guidance on, you need help understanding what exactly they're asking for, but the application is just forms, we quote every grant we write on a case-by-case basis. And it always depends on, we budget out the hours we think it will take us to write it, and we'll come to you with that number. So the project we're working on with Austin is a grant we've worked on several times, so that number doesn't really change, but it's always a case-by-case quote.
Yeah, I should have said that.
It's okay.
Yeah, just a comment on a previous question about, my name is Ryan Casey. I'm the district director for Congressman Larson. You heard from him via video at the beginning. He sends his regrets. He's in D.C. right now. But as for who is eligible for these provisions, I don't want to take anything away from the expertise you get from consultants or lobbyists. Oftentimes you do get what you pay for. I'm an attorney, so that's something to be said. But Congressman Larson, and I'm sure other members of the delegation would want people to know that you should have access to your government and to finding out which provisions that you might be eligible for. So a lot of these, it's complicated with the IIJA, the Inflation Reduction Act. Some of these are adding money to existing programs. Some of them are creating completely new programs, and even the federal agencies are kind of working themselves out right now and how all that works. But at the very least, we would love to hear from you. I've got business cards. Come and see me at the break or whatever. And we'd love to find out what projects might apply for certain programs. So I just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
Thank you. And let me give a plug to industry associations, both the Passenger Vessel Association and the American Waterways Operators. I know I've got committees and teams that are looking at these funding opportunities, and so they are also a great resource to talk to about what others are doing in the industry, and also which congressional delegations may be worth talking to help understand whether you can get letters of support and other things to go with your grant. So don't forget those other resources out there. A question for Austin.
I think there's a question out there.
I'm sorry, was there another question? Sorry, I've got the lights here and it's hard
Yeah,
to
it's hard to
see.
see.
So,
Hi, Sebastian, I have a question for you. So of those, I think 500-ish grants that you've worked on in the past, what percentage of those are for maritime projects, for maritime grants? And then do you expect that that percentage will increase with more grant opportunities available with the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure and Jobs Act?
Off the top of my head, I don't know the exact number of marine applications that we've worked on. I do expect it to increase. We have seen pretty much all of the types of projects that we work on drastically increase just over the last year because there's been so much funding in the space. We've had a huge influx of new clients, and we are trying to constantly be apprised of, who needs help in the space, where is it new to the funding agencies, is it new to operators, is it new to technology designers? But if you will let me get back to you, I can definitely ask how many maritime projects we've worked on.
great.
I've got a question for Austin. You're in the vessel leasing business, and I guess there's a set of kind of norms and ratios and whatever around your status quo technologies, which is, I guess, where the bulk of your fleet is, or all of your fleet is today.
It is.
How do you see that changing as we move into the kinds of vessels that we've been hearing about today, whether that be battery electric or various forms of hydrogen or whatever, high capex, low opex? What does that mean for you as a vessel leasing organization?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Yeah, you're right. Right now, everything we have is normal ICE on the towboat side. The barges, they've got Tier 3 pump engines on the tank barge side, and the hopper barge is just a floating bathtub. But as I look kind of downstream, right, we've got to get this first boat on the water. We've got to work out the bugs because there's going to be problems. But I really see this as the future. As I was mentioning in my talk there, I can see, a path to building another 50 boats like this. And the likes of Savannah, BP, I think there's going to be other things that come, not just necessarily a vessel. I mean, one thing right now that Mike is designing for us is a power barge where we can put 2 of the E1 Marine containers on there. And we could cold iron ships, or a container, or what is that thing? Cruise ship as at port and get them off their auxiliary power. So from a vessel standpoint, I think I can see a path to 50 more hydrogen ones. I think they'll change as we continue to learn more and work out the issues, because there's going to be issues. But I see all these ancillary opportunities that I get really excited about. Again, the ferry space, I know they're mostly owned by municipalities, but I'm sure there's a bunch of private owners that we can probably do something together. And the power barge side, the container on barge side, I see a lot of upside there. And as I look forward on a dollar amount, I'd love to put $1 billion to work in that segment as I think about the future.
Okay, any other questions from the audience? We'll do one more and then call it a wrap. Austin, obviously, Maritime Partners has grown rapidly, so you seem to have found a niche in the U.S. maritime industry financing world. Mm-hmm. How would you define that in terms of compared to traditional financial groups such as, I know a lot of banks have gotten out of the marine industry from having been burned. There is some venture capital out there. How would you describe your niche?
That's a good question. Typically we would see back kind of call it 2012 timeframe where certain regional banks and big bulge bracket banks were financing 110% LTV at 3%. Those days in our opinion are gone. With the implementation of Basel II, Basel III, and other regulations these banks are forced to abide by. It's a real struggle for them to put capital to work. And I think the biggest thing that separates us is our ability to understand risk and, more importantly, the residual value of these assets. You see a lot of these traditional banks over the years that will do a 10-year lease with an existing operator priced to an EBO or an early buyout option. And, you run the math and the calculus, and it's like a 3 or a 5% return. That doesn't get anybody excited. but they don't like risk. And if an operator returns that equipment back to a big bank, we've seen so much opportunity, and we've executed on that, where they're scrambling, spending $90,000, $100,000 a month storing these assets. Well, we'll take them at a steep discount and redeploy them on behalf of the bank and make a spread, because the banks simply don't understand the risk or how to redeploy these things in a thoughtful manner. It just goes back to the relationships, and our niche is very simple. 85% of our mandate in our fund is Jones Act. We've got a small carve-out for international ships. Globally, we can't compete with the cost of capital, with the state-owned banks in China that are underwriting deals at 2%. So it's not attractive to us. And candidly, that market is quite a bit more volatile. So it's something that the risk that we're not willing to take. But on the Jones Act side, we understand that, and we can underwrite that and structure around any risk where a bank could not get comfortable. So.
Great. And on that, I'd like to thank our panelists very much. Could you give them a round of applause?